On July 15, 2010, a 24-year-old broken young man from Goulburn, New South Wales, found himself performing an action that defied common sense, ringing his bank, St. George, to request a $50,000 overdraft into his mortgage account. When the transfer went through, without the bank blinking, his life veered into an astonishing spiral of luxury, travels, strip clubs, boats, fast cars, and celebrity lifestyle. Meet Luke "Milky" Moore, born in 1986, raised in a middle-class family. His father, Brett, was a bank executive. His mother, Annette, was a childcare supervisor in Goulburn, just 2 hours southwest of Sydney. By mid-2010, Luke was unemployed, reeling from a serious car crash that left physical and emotional scars, had lost his home, his relationship, and was on the financial brink. That July day marked his crossing, a seemingly innocent phone call that unlocked an unlimited bank glitch. Luke grew up working from age 13, bagging groceries, mowing lawns, even selling insurance, dreaming of early success. He bought his first home at 19 with high hopes. But the 2008 financial crisis, loss of job, a violent truck collision leaving multiple fractures, and caring for his ailing mother led to depression. He moved in with his father as a bank teller, but descended further into despair after a painful breakup. The bank glitch began with normal mortgage deductions. On July 15, 2010, instead of the regular $500 Luke's savings dipped by $500, but so did his mortgage, creating invisible credit. Realizing the error, he tested it. $5,000, then $50,000. And it worked. This wasn't advanced planning. It was a stunned improvisation echoing his fresh start mentality. Over the next 2 years, Luke lived like a rock star, moved to Surfer's Paradise Gold Coast in July 2011, lived in hotels and rooftop apartments, bought luxury cars, Alfa Romeo, Hyundai Veloster, Maserati, Aston Martin, and a fishing boat. Spent extravagantly on strip clubs, drugs, alcohol, and exotic travel to Thailand. Amassed celebrity memorabilia, art, including Banksy, Dali, autographed jerseys, some stored back home in Goulburn. With PayPal tricks and daily ATM runs, he withdrew up to $2,000 per day and funneled cash through collaborations with strip club owners to bypass limits. Total drawdown reached $1.67 million before bank alarms sounded. In November 2012, the Maserati mechanic saw "Call Bank Security" flash on the credit card terminal. That morning, Luke fled to Phuket with cash in his pocket and souvenir dreams. On December 12, 2012, NS Dollar Police raided his childhood home in Goulburn with a search warrant. They found hollowed-out Bibles stuffed with cash, art, cars, a boat, and luxury goods. He was charged with knowingly dealing with proceeds of crime and dishonestly obtaining financial advantage by deception, in the tune of over $2.18 million. Luke was arrested in December 2012. The seizure devastated his family. His mother collapsed in court. His father, Brett, lost his bank job. On April 17, 2015, a Sydney district court sentenced him to 4 years, 6 months in prison, the judge condemning his behavior as almost laughable deception. Luke served about 6 months before being granted bail. On August 6, 2015, he represented himself via video link before the New South Wales Supreme Court, arguing that no deception occurred. The bank authorized the overdrafts through internal policy failures. The court agreed. On December 1, 2016, the NS Dollars Court of Appeal cleared him, noting his transactions were recorded accurately. St. George Bank later ceased pursuit of the remaining debt. He walked free, stripped of the glamour but liberated. Luke moved back in with his mother in Goulburn. He enrolled in law school, determined to make amends by becoming a criminal lawyer. He now reflects, "The bank glitch gave him a surreal taste of what wealth could do, but it nearly ruined him and everyone around him." He often remarks that, had he been smarter, he could have netted tens of millions and bought a private island. But he didn't. Luke's story endures as a modern parable. The intoxicating power of unexpected wealth. the fragility of ethical boundaries, and the legal gray area of deception versus mistake. He now applies his extraordinary experience to defend others, a second chance born from a manufactured fortune. For 4 months, one man lived like a king, chartering private jets, renting luxury villas, racking up bar tabs in the tens of thousands, and handing out free money to strangers like some modern-day Robin Hood. But this wasn't the story of a lottery winner or a trust fund heir. It was the story of an ordinary Australian bartender who discovered a glitch in the banking system that allowed him to withdraw unlimited funds, and no one noticed. At first. This is the bizarre, almost unbelievable true story of Dan Saunders, the man who became a millionaire overnight, not through theft, not through fraud, but through a computer error. What started as a drunken experiment ended in global headlines, a criminal investigation, and a moral dilemma that still haunts him to this day. In 2011, Dan Saunders was living in Wangaratta, a quiet town in Victoria, Australia. He was 29 years old, worked part-time as a bartender, and was, by most accounts, just like any other young Australian, trying to make ends meet, hanging out with friends, and occasionally partying a little too hard. But one night, after a few drinks and a casual attempt to move money between his savings and credit accounts at an ATM, Dan stumbled upon something extraordinary. A banking loophole so severe it would ultimately allow him to transfer over $1.6 million into his own account without raising any immediate alarms. For a time, it felt like he had unlocked cheat codes to real life. But as Dan's spending became increasingly reckless, and as he began documenting his exploits, the silence from the bank would eventually give way to a full-scale investigation, and the clock began ticking. Born and raised in regional Victoria, Dan Saunders was, by all accounts, an ordinary guy. He wasn't a tech genius. He wasn't a hacker. He wasn't even particularly ambitious. He worked shifts at the bar, hung out with friends, and studied to become a teacher at La Trobe University, but later dropped out. Those who knew him said he was friendly, clever, and funny, a people person. But Dan also had a reckless streak, a fascination with chaos, and a tendency to push boundaries. In his own words, he was just curious what would happen when the ATM allowed him to make a strange transfer. What followed wasn't the result of a grand scheme or criminal mastermind. It was impulsive, unplanned, and incredibly dangerous. And yet, it worked for a while. The discovery came almost by accident. One night in February 2011, Dan was out drinking with friends. He needed to move some money between his accounts. He approached a National Australia Bank NAB ATM and attempted a transfer from his credit account to his savings. To his surprise, the ATM allowed him to transfer more money than he had available, and the transaction went through. When he checked his balance the next morning, the funds had appeared. Real money that he could now withdraw and spend. Dan was stunned, so he tried it again, and again. The glitch worked only during a specific window, between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m., when the bank's systems were offline for routine overnight maintenance. During that time, transactions weren't instantly reconciled. The ATM would assume the funds existed and allow the transfer even if they didn't. It wasn't hacking. It wasn't even fraud in the traditional sense. It was exploiting a technical timing error. And for months, no one noticed. Once Dan realized the loophole was repeatable, things escalated rapidly. What started as small experiments soon turned into high-stakes withdrawals. He would make dozens of transfers within the 1-hour window, sometimes moving tens of thousands of dollars each night. He transferred funds into his NAB savings account, and once they appeared, he could withdraw them at any ATM or use the card freely. And Dan did just that. He flew to Bali, where he partied in private villas. He hosted lavish parties in Melbourne's best clubs, once running up a $20,000 bar tab in a single night. He paid strangers' bills, gave away cash to the homeless, and even chartered private jets. Friends came along for the ride. He hired luxury chauffeurs and penthouse suites. At one point, he transferred over $900,000 into his account in a single week. But Dan wasn't hiding. He openly told friends what he was doing. He documented parts of his adventures on Facebook. In his mind, it wasn't theft. The bank hadn't stopped him, and the money kept flowing. It felt like he had discovered a legal glitch in the matrix. But by May 2011, after 4 months, the funds stopped. Without warning, his bank accounts were frozen, and the ATMs stopped working. The system had finally caught up. But Dan had already spent nearly $1.6 million. Surprisingly, the bank didn't immediately press charges. NAB quietly investigated the internal failure, reviewing ATM logs and transaction data. They quickly identified the issue. The batch processing delay during overnight hours had created a vulnerability. Dan was the only person known to have exploited it so systematically. The glitch was patched. The loophole was closed. But for months, no legal action was taken. Dan, now unable to access funds and increasingly paranoid, expected a knock on the door any day. It never came. He even turned himself in to the police in 2014, nearly 3 years later, but they told him they had no record of a case or warrant. Frustrated and riddled with guilt, Dan went public. In 2015, he gave an exclusive interview to Vice, detailing everything. It made international headlines. The man who hacked his bank account and got away with it. But now that the world knew, the legal system had no choice but to act. In April 2015, shortly after the Vice interview went viral, Dan Saunders was formally charged. He faced 111 counts of fraud and theft totaling over $1.6 million. Each count corresponded to an unauthorized transfer or withdrawal. Dan didn't fight it. He pleaded guilty. In December 2015, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison, with a minimum non-parole period of 8 months. The sentence was considered lenient. The judge noted that Dan hadn't committed the fraud to harm anyone or for long-term gain. There was no lavish home, no secret assets, no hidden cash. The money had been burned in reckless hedonism. He wasn't a criminal genius, just a bartender who went too far. But prison wasn't easy. Dan was sent to Beechworth Correctional Center, a minimum security prison in Victoria. He described it as worse than the crime itself. The isolation, the shame, and the reputation followed him. Dan Saunders was released from prison in 2016. He emerged broke, deeply regretful, and with a criminal record that barred him from many jobs and financial services. He returned to bartending, this time with far fewer illusions about money, power, or morality. To this day, Dan reflects on what happened with both shame and bewilderment. "It wasn't the money that destroyed me," he once said. "It was the illusion of invincibility." His story is now studied in tech security forums, finance circles, and even ethics classes, a bizarre intersection of technology, temptation, and personal downfall. Dan Saunders didn't rob a bank. He didn't break in with a gun or wear a mask. He simply pressed a few buttons. But the consequences were as real as if he had. And the biggest question remains. If you found a way to legally print money, would you press the button? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you are enjoying these stories, please hit the like button and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello to you in the comments. On May 4th, 2016, at Sydney International Airport, Christine Jackson Lee, a 21-year-old Malaysian-born chemical engineering student at the University of Sydney, was stopped by federal police just tickets shy of boarding a flight to Kuala Lumpur. A shocking discovery. Between July 2014 and April 2015, Westpac Bank's systems mistakenly granted her an unlimited overdraft, totaling 4.6 million Australian dollars. Christine Jackson Lee was 21 at the time of arrest. She was born in Malaysia in 1994 and moved to Australia to pursue a Bachelor of Chemical Engineering at the University of Sydney. Reserved and academically driven, she lived a modest life on scholarships, focused on lab work and textbooks. Until her world shifted dramatically when Westpac erroneously removed her overdraft cap. Soon she was transferring funds to PayPal, splurging on Cartier bracelets, Dior and Hermes handbags, and other luxury goods. Between July 2014 and April 2015, she withdrew approximately 4,653,333 Australian dollars. Christine arrived in Sydney in mid-2013 at age 18. A top student, she earned a place in one of Australia's most rigorous engineering programs. Outside class, she lived frugally, shared flats in Camperdown, part-time tutoring to cover living costs. She had a long-term boyfriend, Vincent King, who described her as a good girl and claimed he had no idea about her sudden spending sprees. Westpac, one of Australia's Big Four banks, maintains strict overdraft controls, but a system upgrade glitch removed the cap on Christine's account without alerting her or bank staff. By mid-2014, Christine had received her first overdraft balloon. Did she understand the mistake immediately? The court heard she quietly transferred large sums to her PayPal and external accounts. Between July and April, she withdrew money in increments to avoid detection. Regular withdrawals, cross-border payments, and luxury shopping. Prosecutors would later allege she failed to notify the bank that she was not entitled to the money. But defense argued it wasn't a plan to defraud, just an accidental boon she didn't realize was wrong. Christine's spending ramped up between late 2014 and early 2015, more than $750,000 on handbags alone. She purchased dozens of high-end luxury items, Cartier bracelets, Hermes Birkin bags, Dior totes, sent via online orders or bought in Sydney boutiques. She also transferred $1.15 million to PayPal in just 14 transactions on a single day. Payments flagged the bank's risk monitors, triggering suspicions. By April 2016, Westpac's fraud detection team noticed the large flows and flagged irregular activity for investigation. In April 2016, Westpac froze her accounts and began seeking clarification. Phone calls and emails reportedly went unanswered. Magistrate Lisa Stapleton later observed that they gave it to her, questioning whether Christine had knowingly done anything illegal. The bank initiated civil proceedings to recover funds, while police launched a fraud squad investigation, examined her spending and lifestyle. A search warrant was issued in March 2016, uncovering her flight booking and emergency passport attempts. By May 2016, arrest was imminent. On May 4, 2016, Christine arrived at Sydney Airport intending to fly to Malaysia. Authorities intercepted her. She was arrested and charged with dishonestly obtaining financial advantage by deception and knowingly dealing with proceeds of crime. Held briefly, she was granted bail by Magistrate Stapleton, who questioned whether a crime had actually been committed. After all, the bank itself had accidentally extended the funds. Westpac sought civil recovery, but criminal charges proceeded. In December 2017, the Director of Public Prosecutions dropped all charges against Christine. The decision came after a similar case. A man withdrew millions from ATMs and had charges dismissed, set a precedent. Civil recovery remained open. The bank intended to pursue the missing $4.6 million in court. For Christine, the ordeal brought public scrutiny, humiliation, and legal limbo. She returned items, Cartier, Hermes, Dior, in April 2016, and seizure orders were placed in May. The media portrayed her alternately as a calculating fraudster and an unwitting beneficiary of bureaucracy. The case spurred banks nationwide to audit overdraft safeguards and automated alerts. Does ignorance of a bank error exonerate wrongdoing? The law struggled to categorize this case. Christine paid a heavy personal price, reputation tarnished, future opportunities clouded, even as criminal culpability dissolved. If you were in her shoes, would you have returned the money or bought more expensive items? What would you do if $7 million suddenly appeared in your bank account overnight? No strings attached, no warning, and no explanation. For a 41-year-old Malaysian man named Ari Yusof, this wasn't a hypothetical question. One seemingly ordinary morning in June 2021, he logged into his Maybank account and discovered something extraordinary. An unexplainable 28.2 million Malaysian ringgit, roughly $7 million had been deposited into his personal account. No emails, no phone calls, just cold, hard, spendable cash. What began as confusion soon turned into a dangerous fantasy. Instead of reporting the glitch, Ari saw an opportunity. one that would pull him into a whirlwind of impulsive luxury lifestyle. But how exactly did this happen? Malaysia has seen its fair share of bizarre bank blunders, but few have spiraled so dramatically as the case of Ari Yusof, a man with no criminal record, no flashy reputation, and no apparent interest in fraud, until fate handed him a $7 million temptation. This was no ordinary embezzlement case. It was a banking systems error, and Yusof wasn't a hacker, a white-collar criminal, or even a financially savvy manipulator. He was a regular citizen, thrown into an irregular situation, and what he did next turned him into one of the most infamous names in Malaysia's financial crime history. Ari Yusof was born and raised in Shah Alam, the capital of Selangor, Malaysia. A middle-class citizen, he worked a modest job as a warehouse manager for a local logistics company. Those who knew him described him as unremarkable, quiet, punctual, and largely disconnected from the digital world or any luxurious lifestyle. He had no criminal background, no business empire, no connections to high-powered figures. His bank account at Maybank Berhad, Malaysia's largest financial services group, was primarily used for salary deposits, minor household expenses, and the occasional family vacation fund. Until the day it wasn't. Yusof didn't engineer a scam or code malicious software. The money simply appeared, due to what Maybank would later admit was a technical error during a software update on the bank's end, tied to cross-ledger account reconciliation. For hours, Ari stared at the numbers. At first, he thought it was a banking display glitch or a prank. But after repeated logins, checking the balance at an ATM, and transferring a small test amount to a friend, which succeeded, he realized the money was actually accessible. Instead of alerting the bank, Ari waited, watched, and then decided he was going to spend it. Ari's spending spree was swift, erratic, and wildly indulgent. Over the course of 4 weeks, he used the funds to live out every suppressed fantasy he had. He walked into a dealership in Petaling Jaya and paid cash for a 2021 Mercedes-Benz S-Class, worth over 800,000 Malaysian ringgit. He purchased 2 Rolex watches, diamond rings, and gold chains from Bukit Bintang outlets, dropping another 400,000 Malaysian ringgit. He flew first class to Dubai, stayed at the Burj Al Arab, and posted Instagram photos with captions like, "Living the dream." He made a deposit on a condominium in Mont Kiara, worth 2.1 million Malaysian ringgit, paying upfront using a bank draft. The spree continued without consequence for a while. But behind the scenes, something else was brewing. In a twist of events, Maybank's internal audit team caught the discrepancy within 3 weeks. During a routine end-of-quarter review in early July 2021, auditors flagged an unexplained debit from a corporate treasury reconciliation account, matching Ari Yusof's name. A specialized forensic accounting unit was called in. Within days, they traced dozens of transactions to Ari's personal account. He had been transferring large amounts, purchasing assets under his name, and even making crypto investments using local exchanges. The bank froze the account and alerted the Royal Malaysia Police, PDRM. By the time they tracked him down, Ari had just returned from Thailand, where he'd allegedly gambled away nearly 600,000 Malaysian ringgit in a single weekend at a casino. On July 19, 2021, police executed a raid at his condominium in Kuala Lumpur. They recovered bank receipts, jewelry, luxury shopping bags, and cryptocurrency hardware wallets. Ari was arrested the same day. According to police reports, he did not resist. When asked why he didn't report the error, he reportedly said, "I thought maybe it was a reward or a gift, something divine." He was charged under Section 403 of the Malaysian Penal Code, dishonest misappropriation of property, which carries a sentence of up to 5 years in prison, a fine, and whipping. During the trial at Shah Alam Sessions Court, prosecutors laid out every transaction. The defense argued that the money was not stolen, in the conventional sense, as it was deposited into his account by the bank itself, but the judge ruled that Ari had a moral and legal obligation to report the funds once he noticed the error, and by choosing to spend it, he knowingly misappropriated the money. In January 2022, He was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay back over 2.5 million Malaysian ringgit in assets that had not yet been liquidated or spent. Ari Yusof served his time quietly, avoiding media interviews. In a statement released through his lawyer after sentencing, he wrote, "I did wrong, but it's hard to turn away from a miracle when your life has never had one." What this case exposed wasn't just a glitch in the bank's code, it was a glitch in human behavior, the moment when ethics get shaken by temptation. And the question still lingers: what would you do if you woke up to $7 million in your account tomorrow morning? It was Friday, February 1st, 2019, a day like any other. An 18-year-old student from Belfast walked past the Donegal Place branch of Nationwide Bank with a check in hand, a birthday gift of £8,900 from his grandmother. He expected a standard transaction, a modest boost to his student savings. Instead, when he logged into his mobile banking app, he caught sight of a figure so absurd, so out of reach, that his heart beat faster: £8,900,000. He had become a multi-millionaire overnight, by mistake. Immediately, he sent a message to his mother, Caroline, with a screenshot. She stared at the seven-figure sum and thought it must be a mistake, but the numbers glared back at her anyway. £8.9 million. The teenager, nearly speechless, asked, "Can I order a Porsche?" Caroline's reply was firm. "No, you realize that's not our money." The mood shifted from disbelief to contemplation in an instant. Meet Dane Gillespie, born in 2000. Dane was a typical Belfast teenager, academically capable, with dreams of cars and independence, but grounded and respectful. Caroline, his mother, who was a local school teacher, recalled raising him in an unshowy Belfast enclave. Her husband worked in IT, and they lived a modest life. Dane's greatest luxury was perhaps the occasional takeaway meal or concert ticket. Dane never expected to see such huge amount of money in his account. Rumors say he wrote a mental shopping list, Porsche, maybe a short holiday. Yet, within minutes, rationality returned. "That's not our money," he told Caroline. No one tried to withdraw, spend, or conceal. They waited for the bank to realize the glitch. At around 9 a.m., a branch employee in Belfast entered the check amount incorrectly, inadvertently adding extra zeros. Instead of £8,900, the system recorded £8,900,000. The banking system treated it as a valid transaction, posting it to Dane's account. For a brief time, that balance was visible, if only digitally. Dane stared at the screen, bemused, hopeful, but unable to touch the phantom wealth. Nationwide's internal monitoring system, designed to catch suspicious transactions, lit up immediately. The balance defied all norms. A branch manager checked the electronic logs, saw a discrepancy, and reversed the entry. A spokeswoman later stated, "The error was noticed straight away, and the balance was corrected in a matter of seconds." A routine human error, but with extraordinary consequences. No law enforcement got involved. There was no crime. Nationwide confirmed Dane hadn't accessed the funds. The payment had never actually made it into the teen's account. There were no charges, no criminal investigation. The incident was chalked up as a banking mistake, expensive, curious, but ultimately harmless. By mid-morning, Dane's balance reverted to a sane £8,900. His ripple of millionaire dreams vanished in a click, replaced with the usual student budget. For a moment, though, the reality of those 7 digits lingered. Caroline later mused, "For an 18-year-old being a millionaire for the day, it's mad." In the end, Dane returned to classes, part-time work, and studying. The lesson? Even when fortune arrives by mistake, integrity and calm, plus a caring family, matter far more than a digital error. What do you think of Dane's actions? Would you have acted differently? Share your thoughts in the comments.